good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from, and welcome back to day 5 of Outsource to LAC Virtual Week 2020. We made it to Friday all in one piece, and it's good that we did because we have a fantastic panel ahead of us today. As you know, for the past 9 years, Outsource to LAC has offered a space for technology service providers from across Latin America and the Caribbean to network, to explore business opportunities through our matchmaking meetings, and learn about the latest trends in technology directly from the companies who are pushing the envelope in their respective areas. Today's session will be conducted entirely in English. Esta sesión será en inglés, así que los invitamos a utilizar el botón de interpretación simultánea que encontrarán en la parte de abajo de la ventana. Lastly, we invite you to share your questions for today's presenters on the chat. The team will be reviewing them, and we will share a couple before the session ends. As you know, today's session is called Animation Acceleration, Opportunities for Caribbean Animation and Game Design Firms in the New Normal. It's an honor to introduce the speakers that are with us today. Joining us from Jamaica, we have Diane Edwards, President of JAMPRO. From Trinidad and Tobago, Camille Selvin Abrahams, Founding Director of Anime Caribe Festival and Full Circle Animation Studios, and Program Coordinator of Animation Studies at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Also from Trinidad and Tobago, Kaifas Moore, Creative Director at Coded Arts and Senior Lecturer at UTT. And from Jamaica, Kenya Matis, Co-Founder and CEO of Listen Me. Thank you all for joining us. And to moderate today's panel, we have our colleague, Krista Lucenti, Senior Sector Specialist for the Integration and Trade Sector at the Inter-American Development Bank. Krista, welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you, Itzel. And congratulations on a fantastic event. I've been watching a few of the sessions during the week, and really, I think this has been a great way to pivot and to continue to work closely with our colleagues in the region who are currently active in the outsourcing sector. So, congrats again. I'm very honored to be moderating this session with my friends and colleagues, Diane, Camille, Kaifas, and Kenya. So I know, and we'll just, I think, start right into it, but from my perspective, having lived here for the last couple of years, the Caribbean's always really been a leader in creative services, I think, but it's primarily always been known for its vibrant carnivals and its rich music diversity. But in recent years, I think animation game development has really taken hold in the region through the production of both the original content, and I've seen many, and I'm sure you'll talk about it today, and we're happy to take a peek at those, as well as capturing some of the outsourcing streams from the larger production companies in North America and Europe. So in your opinion, panelists, and I'll start with Diane, what do you think differentiates Caribbean artists and content from other countries? You're on mute, Diane.
Yeah, I know. One has to remember with this technology. Yeah, I think thanks for that, Krista, and thanks to IDB for this whole event. Yeah, Caribbean culture is really kind of at the crossroads of a whole melting pot of cultures. And I think that out of that, the Caribbean has really synthesized its own identity and its own voice and its own ethos. I think it's obviously rooted in our history and rooted in the different cultural contributions of various cultures, Chinese, Indian, African, European, because it's really the meeting place of almost all the world cultures, Amerindian on top of it. So I think it's out of that whole history that we have developed our eating habits, or singing, or dancing, or whole cultural content. And I would love to play a short video on some of the ways in which we have expressed that in terms of animation, because I think it's fresh, it's new, it's different. You've all heard of reggae music, soca, samba, all of the salsa, everything that comes out of the Caribbean. But I think that the voices of animators is now taking on a new dynamism, and I think it's really important to show that.
Lights,
Camera,
So I think that kind of gives you a snapshot of, we've got one foot in the past and another foot in the technology of the future. So I think that's what's really exciting about the Caribbean, is that whole coming together and that fusion of a number of different influences.
Thank you, Diane. And I love the video. It's so vibrant and colorful and much like the region. So I really enjoyed that. Kaifas, what would you say to the same question about what differentiates Caribbean artists?
I think what differentiates us a lot is that we have many ethnicities here, especially in Trinidad. So our artists are familiar with creating assets across various facial skin tones and things of that nature. And we also have our own folklore, our own stories and mythologies, and which can lead to our own brand of localized content that many people haven't seen across the world or the region for that matter.
Kenya, what's your opinion?
I mean, just to echo what my colleagues are saying, I think that we have some very unique stories to tell here, and that's colored by our different perspectives. We come from, small islands, but we have big heart, we have big stories, and we have a big brand when you look at how we have influenced the world in our music through Carnival. I think that we have a lot of leverage that we can use to see how that shapes the stories that we tell. And I think that that level of excitement and vibe makes our content and our artists very different in the stories that we share to the world.
And lastly, Camille, what is your take as someone who is both an educator and an animator herself? What would your opinion be on this? You're still on mute.
I can't believe I just did that. I've done this so many times, but it's pretty interesting. I'm coming from the education side of it. But certainly one of the things that makes us different, I think, also is our diaspora. Before I talk a bit about that, I'd love to play a clip regarding, what we are doing in Trinidad and Tobago regarding animation and game in the country, if that is possible.
Yes, my colleague's starting it now. Just, there we go.
Okay, so that's not it. I mean, I could talk a bit about it while it comes on. So as I said, I agree with what my associates said, but I think the diaspora has a lot to do with this. The fact that, we have a history of Europe, part of our experience, Africa, part of our experience, India, China, in Trinidad and Tobago, Syria, we have a Syrian, historical link. So with that, I think we are able to assimilate and understand cultural nuances. That's very important. We are able to replicate, for instance, if an outsourcing job comes to the Caribbean, we understand those cultural nuances because we've experienced it. So I'll let the video play and then I'll continue. Okay, so what you saw there was not industry work, that was our students' work. So that's a different thing. So just to finish up on the question, for example, I know one of the disadvantages of the Indian outsourcing industry really is that difficulty that they may have with certain articulations, movement, even translation of English or whatever other language. So our global experience allows us to fit seamlessly into a global workflow.
Thanks, Camille. Well, maybe just building on that question then. So where do you see, and I'll start with you again, Camille, where do you see then the future of for Caribbean firms? Is it in the production of original content? Is it through the capture of outsourcing streams? Are they mutually exclusive? What do you see, or are they mutually compatible? So what would you see, Camille, as the future for the sector in the region?
Okay, so because of the fact that this is new to us, right? This is relatively new. Animation industry is relatively new. We are an oil and gas country, right? That's what we knew. So bringing in this sort of this sort of industry took a lot of time for it to get to, you know, to the level that it needs to get at. Certainly, because we are new to it, we have to do it hand in hand. It must happen hand in hand, because in order for outsourcing to be successful, you have to demonstrate that you can do the work. So therefore, by pushing IP, intellectual property, and pushing content, it means that we are building the portfolio of the Caribbean and of Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore that then can be used to show the global community that we can create a high level of animation and game art, things like that. We're already doing that on a small scale in Trinidad and Tobago, as I'm sure Kaifas will share.
I think if I could come in there, I think what is interesting about the Caribbean is that we, because of the breadth of experience, we are able to have the cultural affinity with a number of different groups. And I think that's part of the importance of the region and its location and its cultural ties, because we have found this in the outsourcing industry generally, that we're able to talk in the idiom of the United States, or the idiom of the United Kingdom, or the idiom of a number of our people, our indigenous people. So you mentioned Lebanese, etc. We are able to have affinity with a number of different people. And if you graft onto that technology, I think it's where technology and creativity meet. That is really the opportunity for the Caribbean. But I think that also bringing people in to do contract work in the Caribbean is a real opportunity, and they're both synergistic. We have found in the film industry in Jamaica, for instance, where we're more entrenched, that the bread and butter of the industry is all the music videos, the TV series, the location films that come down. But that enables us access to new and wider technologies that we can then employ in developing our own cultural products. So something like a short film that was done by a Jamaican company team called Flight, really creative, really, it's about a little boy wanting to go to space because he thinks he'll meet his mother in heaven. So it's a universal story, but told from a Caribbean perspective. So I think that that's where the opportunity lies for us, is in blending those elements.
Kaifas, what would you say is the future of the sector? And well, not so much the future of the sector, but you're in game development, amongst other things. That's a massive industry, and some large global players. How do you see yourself, your firm, the region's firms fitting into that global billion and billion dollar industry?
I think it fits in nicely because recently the global industry has realized that there's not enough skilled people on the planet to deliver the amount of content necessary just to fulfill the games themselves. Sony and Xbox are about to release their next generation platforms at the end of this year. That being said, the amount of content that would be needed to fulfill this market, it's exuberant. We do not have enough people to do it. So the Caribbean is a perfect place for that. In addition to that, we have the sweet spot for things. We have a preferred time zone for West Coast and European clients. We have a stable government. We have favorable wages. We have non-existent language barrier. And on top of that, we have a very, very nice location where clients can send people to come and train their artists and staff down here. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. In addition to that, I think we have one of the most viable currency of culture that has ever been seen on this planet with our own IPs. And it's just something that is on the brink of becoming very large if we do it properly and steadily with the teams that we have going right now.
Kenya, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that to answer the question of what's the future, from my perspective, I'm from the perspective of an animation and design studio that's been operating in Jamaica for the past 7 years. And our bread and butter is in doing, outsourced and client work, in building, in creating animations. We do games and also apps for companies. But because we are, from an artist first perspective, our passion is creating our own IP. And while doing that helps us to, learn, experiment, and to create things that we're passionate about, what we find is that it's really in the original IP that we get to create our calling card. That's what we're mostly recognized for. That's what actually attracts more work to us. And it helps us to network with persons who probably we wouldn't have come in contact with before to make bigger projects. Because an interesting thing when you're from a small studio in a small country working on smaller projects, sometimes you're looking at a perspective where you're probably targeting a small market as well. But once you actually collaborate with someone who is, working on larger projects in other countries, you can get to open up your market to, larger audiences, and your earning potential also increases. So, and I can't see us actually getting there without flexing our muscles through working on original content. So I see where both go hand in hand, but I think that while outsourcing is good to help to keep the lights on, which is super important to stay in the game, you have to have your lights on. It's in creating your original IP that you're going to create long-term value and sustainability for your studio.
And as a follow-up to that, in terms of IP and IP rights, and of course this is always a challenge. It's a challenge in terms of having a robust IP framework in the country, but also in terms of access to financing and being able to, use IP in order to access finance. What are your, Kenya, what do you see in terms of, in your experience in Jamaica or your experience in other countries? I see you're smiling. I might get myself in trouble for this question now, but I think everyone would value, the perspective that you're coming from as a creator, as an artist, and wanting to, protect your own, your art.
I think, well, as Camille had said earlier, by the way, I wish that Jamford answered this question first before I did, to at least, set the groundwork. But as Camille said, we are, we're early entrants or, recent entrants to this industry in the Caribbean. So we do have a lot of groundwork to do when it comes to setting up rules from a policy standpoint that can help young, growing studios to thrive. From my personal experience at Listen Me Caribbean, I love what I do, and I love my team. I think they're really talented. But honestly, like if it weren't for our grit and our just will to push through, it would be a lot more challenging, you know what I mean? Because access to capital, we spoke about a balance earlier of earning while creating original IP, which is really sort of the lifeblood of the company. Creating original IP, if you look at the value change from the create IP and the production standpoint, especially in animation, which is where we thrive, is super expensive. Some productions can be 5 to 10 times more expensive than those from film. that are producing the same, you know, amount of minutes of content. And so investing in that process while you're bootstrapping is really a balance that you have to strike, right? And so I really lift my hat off to other studios and individuals who are able to stay in the game while doing that and pursuing their passion, because we believe so strongly in the opportunity. But I think that some of the areas, if we were able to hunker down and even try and focus on that, some things that would really help us to lower the cost of production would be to collaborate with other people who also have similar skill sets, while the government could help us to focus on things like access to distribution, access to market, so that when we produce, there's a revenue model waiting, you know, for us to actually capitalize on our production. So it's work, and I think that while some of the rules aren't currently in place, which I'm sure Jampro and Camille will speak to, in the meantime, what we really have to do is focus on what we can control, and that is oftentimes collaborating with other people who are in similar spaces, but also hopefully networking with people who are close to the market. So when you produce, your content has a gateway to go through.
I would fully support what Kenya has said, and yeah, this is a challenging area, the whole question of financing, because banks don't understand this industry, certainly not in the Caribbean. I would say banks don't understand creative industries in general, and they don't speak the same language. So, you know, your creatives are speaking on the right brain and the banks are on the left brain. So I think one of the roles that a Jampro can play is to try and bring those together, and we are doing that. We actually have now a CDB funded program which is going to develop a scalable product with Barbados, Trinidad and Jamaican companies working together on a collaboration which will then be investable and which will be marketable. So I think that this is a really good pragmatic approach to bringing three companies together that can really focus on the market. And then I think one of the really exciting things that shows me that the game is changing this year was that we had the first advertising and film production company called Lab listed on the stock exchange, and NCB, National Commercial Bank, was their lead broker. What that shows is that there is some glimmering of hope in the eyes of banks that some way they can support the creative industries. And they did a listing and it was oversubscribed. So I think there is a way to bring finance together with creatives. And I think this is part of our challenge in Jampro going forward. We are also trying to create a film fund, which would, a screen fund rather, not film, screen fund, which would look at screen-based industries and try and help to improve and to support our local creative product, because we think that's critical, as is the question of IP, where we're not there yet, as Kenya said, but we have a plan to subscribe to the Madrid Protocol like in very short order, and we're holding the powers that be to it. So watch this space.
Kaifas or Camille, would you like to comment on the intellectual property rights issue?
Yeah, I would love to jump in. And I'm not going to try to be too long-winded, but I've been home for 4 months, so it's good to see some people I can talk to about this, so bear with me. I mean, if I would have told you guys a few years ago, hey, let's make a video game or a movie based off of Polish folklore, you would look at me and be like, get out of here. But everybody in this room who has Netflix has heard of The Witcher, right? And The Witcher was based off of Polish books and Polish folklore, and a beautiful company named CD Projekt Red took that folklore in Poland, in Warsaw, and made their own video game off of it. And that is what put Poland on the map. And once the government and once people saw that this game was doing so well, it exploded, and the government got behind him, and they started, investing in the schools, and they started investing in the entrepreneurship and giving grants and giving funds for that IP to grow and develop. And now it's on its 3rd title. It has a Netflix series. It's about to have a 2nd season, and it's exploding. And that's a small little example of what can happen and throughout the region, throughout the world, actually. And if you would know that on top of that, now that that company has done so well, now that the government has added to it so much, Poland now has 400 individual gaming companies there, 400. And every year they put out 100 titles just for Poland alone.
I would just like to add to that, to what Kaifas, so everything Kaifas is saying there, but another good model to look at is the Korean model, because in 2007, Korea, they invested millions in the industry. And in my little bit of research, the gaming industry is worth about $11 trillion in Korea. And look at the short time span. So intellectual property is critical for that, because that is where the money comes through, licensing and things like that. So there are some protocols that we need to look at. There are some policies that we need to look at in the Caribbean to make sure that these things are put into place, so that when the investment is made in the creative sector, that we can reap the rewards. So we do have some work to do in that area.
So, because we've talked a little bit about what are some other initiatives that governments can take to create these enabling environments and enabling ecosystems, and also what is, I mean, is it, you know, it's a bit of chicken and egg, right? Because, you know, if the government invests in it, you know, will it thrive, or do you already need a critical mass of firms, you know, in order to really be able to kind of take advantage of those incentives and really build the sector? I know we at the IDB have had many programs in the region on outsourcing, and I think those that have probably been the most successful is when you really have something to build on. And then, because from a government policy perspective, it's very difficult to create something from nothing. And so I'd be interested in your opinion about, you know, how do you from the private sector, I mean, how do you create that critical mass, so that then, you know, governments can say, okay, you know, let's put in place either these types of incentives, whether they're fiscal or whether or not they're training incentives, et cetera, or educational programs. So how from the private sector do you think that you can kind of create that critical mass of firms? Bearing in mind as well, and this will be my last point, that you know, there for many years, as you know, there's been significant brain drain out of the region.
Yeah.
And, you know, how do you keep these firms in Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, where, you know, you can create that critical mass? So maybe I'll put this first to Kenya, and then to Kaifas after to make a comment on that.
I think the topic of brain drain is a really serious one. One of the most, I love Jamaica, I love the Caribbean, but it really pains my heart when you look at some of the statistics which show that because of what you're mentioning, up to 85% of highly skilled graduates actually migrate from our economy. So what we're left with is 15%, and we're going for it, and we really believe in it. But at the same time, because you have, amazing people like Kaifos, who's now in the States, in those markets entrenched, it actually creates a very interesting networking opportunity that we can capitalize on. And so while we do have brain drain, we're a very small region. I think we're 3 million Jamaicans here, maybe 6 if you count the diaspora as well. When you look at how strategically many of us are placed, there are many opportunities for that same collaboration to help us in terms of making those international connections, and with persons who have experience, who are working on projects, who can, connect, through two things which I think private studios would really benefit from are like exchange programs. There's so much to be said for working in a space and seeing the pipeline, experiencing it for yourself, and bringing that knowledge back home, and then sort of replicating that, or building our own version of it here, because we don't necessarily have to migrate to do amazing work. We have a lot here that we can work with. The stories are here, the culture is here. So to maintain that authenticity, there's a lot to be said for having local representation. So I think that through Exchanges, that's super important. On a weekly basis, I do calls with current and former studio heads in different countries just to find out, so how do you solve this problem? How do you solve that problem? Because I don't have all the answers, but I'm very willing to apply and to learn from other people to see what works here or not. And I think another way that us as individual, studios can actually work with others is sometimes you have to take a L and say, okay, this project is not about money. It's really about experience. So I would reach out to other people in other countries who are excited about Jamaican stories and say, okay, we'll contribute to your story if you contribute to ours, almost like a barter system. So you use what you have, which is the people. We have amazing talent, we have amazing stories, and we look at what we don't have, which is money, and say, how can we create value with what we do have? And through that type of exchange, we can actually find out some amazing collaborations can lead to some, projects that we can all learn and grow from. So I think that through exchanges, which I've seen work, and also through like barter programs, private studios can take small steps in trying to, expand at a faster rate than just doing it all on our own.
Yeah, thanks, Kenya, for answering everything and leaving nothing left for me to talk about. I appreciate that. But no, she's right about the brain drain, and myself, as you can tell by my accent, it's American, and I spent most of my life there, 20 years in the video game industry, and now I've did a reverse brain drain and I'm back in the Caribbean. And during COVID-19, during the lockdown, we've been having a come up. So we've had a small studio, Coded Arts. We are working with the clients in LA. I would have loved to show the sizzle reel, but it's under NDA, so we can't show any of that stuff. But we're making games for them, and I've had to literally turn down 3 other offers for work because we don't have enough time to. I'm looking, Kenya. I'm looking. I need your number, girl. I lost it. It's in my other jacket. I will call you, but we need to find other people to help us do that. We need to start working. Trinidad needs to start working with Jamaica. We need to start working with Guyana. We need to start working with Suriname. Because if I would have had 4 other or 5 other artists that are capable to do what we needed to do, we could have taken on 3 or 4 other projects from video game clients in America and Europe this summer alone, just in these past 3 months alone. Every time I come back from someplace, every time I take a break and check my phone, I have people that I've known within the industry at big companies like Konami's or THQs or EAs that are asking me, hey, Kaifis, I hear you're in Trinidad. Do you have 5 artists that can do X, Y, Z? And I'm like, we're full right now because, but these are the things, the opportunities are there. We just need the buy-in from the larger people in the government to understand that here in the Caribbean, it's not, animation and gaming is not a child thing. When somebody comes to me and goes, my son or my daughter loves video games, I'm like, no. You need to love video games because it's $1 billion industry. It's saturating the entire market. Everybody knows who X-Men is. We can't make enough X-Men and Avengers movies, right? Everybody knows who these people are. The biggest multimedia company was founded on the back of a mouse in Disney. So there's no need for us to explain it any further. It's there, the writing is on the wall, and we just need the buy-in to help this industry grow in this region.
Diane, what would you say in terms of how governments, and I know obviously JamPro has been doing a lot in this space in recent years to support the outsourcing sector and more specifically in creative services. So how, what's your response to this? How do you think, are some of these programs feasible, and how is JamPro approaching this?
Absolutely feasible. As I said, we are working on the CDB project. So Kaifos, we really should talk after this because the collaboration, I think, is critical. I think we're just not together enough because we have all this water that separates us. We're not together enough in how we collaborate and present the Caribbean as an opportunity, not individual islands because we're all small, but the Caribbean as an opportunity precisely because of what Kaifos was saying. He has the contacts, he can get the business, but he doesn't have enough artists. We've got enough artists. We had 15 companies in Jamaica participate in a program that we ran in JamPro called the Business of Sustainability of Studios, BOSS. And the whole point about that program was to help studios to put themselves on a more business footing so they could become sustainable. So those are people we can link with ACIFOS or with anyone who's interested in having work done in Jamaica and in helping us develop our creative products. So also I spoke about the Screen Fund, which is going to be also important in helping any kind of screen-based industry to take off. So what we have also done is taken some of our financiers literally to LA to try to understand how does one make money in this industry. So we have a very vibrant stock exchange in Jamaica, the main stock exchange, the junior stock exchange, and now the social stock exchange. So we're really trying to link companies and creators with new opportunities to raise financing. And that's the nexus that we need to create as a government. And then coming down the pike is another really exciting project, which is called BIGGE. That's the acronym. And that is an IDB. So Krista's smiling, she's heard of it. But because it's gonna look at boosting innovation and creativity. So it's boosting innovation, growth, and enterprise, essentially. So what that program is going to do is offer access to finance for creatives, for micro and small and medium-sized enterprises. So I can't go into all the details now, but the point is that there will be a voucher program where people will be able to bring in technical assistance, bring in financing for their working capital, financing because they need to gear up to do a contract. They need to hire outside talent. All sorts of things will be possible under this program. And I am really excited because I think this is a real opportunity for us to get creatives linked with finance. And once they start to understand, you know, that it's not enough to have the talent pool, it's that we have to understand the business side. And once the banks understand that, I think there will be no turning back. And then we'll really start to motor on and deliver that creativity to the world that we have as an opportunity.
Camille, one of the things that, and maybe you can say the final comments on this question, it's two things I think have been raised which are important. The first is the sharing of resources, the sharing of a production pipeline in the region, and also, you know, strengthening the human capital. And you as an educator in the program that you have at UTT, you know, I think that that's really, you know, going to be, as you've said many times, a game changer. And so maybe you can put those two things together for us and have some, and provide us with some your perspective on that.
Sure. So as everyone said, there are impediments to growth that still exist. Yeah. So we are small island economies. We vary in population. We have some islands that have like 5,000 to 11 million. You know, so there's varying things. There are varying resources that each island, you know, specialize in. So there's oil, there's tourism, there's natural resources. However, diversification, which is critically needed, and of course, technology, exponential technology is shifting things. And as Kaifa said, COVID shifted things, whether we liked it or not, it shifted things. So now what do? I strongly believe that government and university and even private sector need to work hand in hand in order to create that enabling ecosystem. So at the moment, for instance, our curriculum at the university, I just want to share a little bit about what we're doing, because we are doing something that is really unique. And with that, we are working with private sector. We are working with the IDB, I mean, which is very critical for the success, is that we are able to get the funding from the IDB to create an outsourcing platform that is very much a part of the university. So I've had an experience where when I was in, I did a talk in China, and I had to talk to the students from the Jilin Animation University. And I had to talk to students in animation. And I entered the room and there were 1,000 animators, students. That's the kind of numbers you're looking for. So therefore, if we are to become competitive, We have to up the numbers. And the only way to up the numbers is to collaborate. It is to share resources, not just with each other, but also with Latin America. We're not even mentioning Latin America. I know, for instance, my studio that I'm the founding director for, Full Circle Animation Studio, we did outsourcing with a Latin American animation studio. There was some issues with, you know, the US dollar and things like that we need to work out, but we were able to outsource work with Latin America. In order to do that, we really have to up the numbers. Now, the project with IDB, that was critical to the success, and it is critical to the success of not just Trinidad and Tobago, but also of the Caribbean. What that funding allowed us to do is to create an outsourcing hub within the university that has some autonomy with business. And with that, at the moment, we have 25 seats. Those 25 seats have all the software, hardware, everything that is needed for 3D animation with 2D animation with music technology and game art and gaming. And this is where CAIFA's needs will be met. With that, we are also able to employ students because 25 seats are going to be ramped up to 100 seats, and eventually we have to take it further. But what it also does, it encourages local content, and we had this conversation before about intellectual property, local content, and how that is important. Well, there we are. It will allow creators within Trinidad and Tobago who have the stories but don't have the equipment or software or even the talent to do it, to actually make it happen. But most important for us is that the university is not an outsourcing studio. What it is a facilitator for small and micro enterprise. So for instance, if CAIFAS needs to ramp up and need 50 students to do a particular job, he doesn't have to hire 50 students for a year. It can come through the hub and then fulfill his needs. The idea for this hub is that we can also support the Caribbean. So we have had to think outside the box to make this a success. And I think the reason why we were able to do it is because I have my hand in the industry. I understand the industry, but I'm also an academic. So it really is about balancing that. So we are also looking for partners in Latin America. So those who are listening, if you want more information, obviously, you can contact me outside of this.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. And in fact, I've seen in the chat that there was already some requests from Bolivia and Ecuador to do some exchanges. And so hopefully people will get in touch through the platform and see whether or not that's something that we could make happen. And certainly, you know, through our Connect Americas and through this Outsource to LAC event, I think there are opportunities to create those business connections with Latin American companies in this space. I want to move to another question, and then we have a few from our audience that I want to get to, and it's really about the appeal of this sector, let's say the growing appeal of this sector to women, to other marginalized communities. And what do you think, or how do you think that we can continue to attract you know, youth at risk, young women, etc., into this space? What makes it appealing, and how can we continue to foster that? And I'll ask all of you that question, maybe starting with CAIFAS, actually.
Okay, I'm just going to talk about the women thing first, because I'm the only man on this panel. So it seems like women are doing very well in this industry, and I love it. But honestly speaking, yes, there are a lot of women in the gaming industry that a lot of people would not understand. I spent 8 years working on a project called The Sims that many people would know about, and half of my colleagues were female, and that was great to see. And that's probably why that's one of the best-selling games in the world right now. When it talks about disenfranchised people, we need to invest in our youth. You know, the gaming industry numbers are staggering, and we all know that, but we need to create more and consume less and invest in our youth. We need to start opening up after-hours places and giving them the software and the hardware, because the only hurdle, is like Camille said, is the buy-in. Not everybody can afford the software. Not everybody can afford the hardware. But I know Caribbean people. You give us a computer and you give us some software and come back in a week, and you go see some things you haven't seen before. And this goes out to all mi gente in Latin America and Central America as well. You know, they are very creative individuals. And if we buy in and invest in this thing, you will see what we can do. And that's my 2 cents on that comment.
Kenya, what are your thoughts on women in game development and animation, and how we can continue to grow that sector?
But I think that there are some recent and very powerful examples of women who have made an impact or a name for themselves in animation and in gaming, and who I think have become an inspiration for some of the young women who I see who come into contact with us at Listen Me. I think of Rebecca Sugars, for instance, and her amazing story with with her animations. You have Craig of the Creek and you have Steven Universe, and those seem to be some of the persons who some of the women who applied to us at Listen Me at the studio seem to mention. And I would say that in terms of the ratio, it seems to be evening out in terms of women expressing an interest in animation. And I'm also a member of the Jamaica Gaming Development Society, and I'm seeing where before it really did used to be dominated mostly by male membership. But there are many women now who are realizing that game development comprises so many skill sets. We need story writers, we need programmers, we need music, we need artists who can write music, who can actually, there's so many skill sets that are required that hopefully with that type of typical, gamer image sort of being put down a bit, and realizing that the variety of skills that are required they span both genders. And I think that there's a lot more appreciation for how powerful it is, not just in for entertainment purposes, but also for educational purposes. There are persons who are coming to us who are looking for edtech games, businesses who are coming to us who are looking for games to help their clients understand their business processes more as well. And so games are no longer just targeting one specific sector, but they're really, spanning various roles and purposes. So I think that that type of, stereotype certainly seems to be on the decline. And how we can continue to promote this growth is through just realizing that there's so many narrative-based games now that I don't think people wouldn't realize how big a hit they would have been. And they're not all about fighting, they're games that are really about life, just everyday life. And so many types of stories are attracting different types of people. And I think that Latin America and the Caribbean we're talking about stories, have great stories which could make great games that both men and women can happily, become a part of.
Camille, what would you, oh, sorry, go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, I would say, Krista, that I don't think Caribbean women see too many limitations. I think one of the things about us as Caribbean people, if you look at the pioneering things we do, I don't think we see limitations. We have bobsled teams without ice, In Jamaica, we actually have a special needs skater who is a gold medalist on ice, in speed ice skating, okay? So just figure that out. So I'm just saying that I don't think we're people who see limitations. Out of the 15 companies that we worked with in the BOSS program, 5 of them were female headed. And we see a lot of entrepreneurial activity across the board from women. So I really don't see a problem. Kenya is definitely, an example of this. And I think there's, and that company I told you about that listed on the stock exchange is also headed by a woman. So I don't think that there's so many limitations anymore. What I think COVID has done, this whole COVID period, is to really show us how much more we can do digitally. And I think that that is going to be critical going forward, because all of the sectors that we work in need the infusion of animation. So animation to teach us about healthcare, animation to teach us about keeping fit. Jamaica Moves is one of our Ministry of Health and Wellness programs. animation is used to convey so many different messages, from advertising to social messages. So I think the opportunity for animation and for gamification is just expanding all the time, because we're just using it in different sectors.
So I could add to that, because with the gender parity, my own experience, I could tell you, it has changed. So in 2000, when I returned to Trinidad and Tobago, studying in London, coming back as a qualified animator, there were no female animators at all. Even my experience in London, there were very, very few female animators. So I actually counteracted that at the university, where we partnered with Microsoft. So Microsoft has something called Girls in ICT. So we've been part of that project for the past 6 or 7 years, where we go out to the communities and we speak to young women. And when we first started the program, there was a 15% intake of females, 85% male. And we deliberately worked on that, and we are very proud to say for the last 4 years, we have about a 40% to 45% female, 55% male. So it can be fixed, this situation, and as it was said before, it's not as rampant as before. You actually are seeing a lot more female. The other thing with animation and gaming that we are noticing, and I know Kaifas will agree with me, is that inclusion is very, very much possible with this sector. We have noticed that we get a lot of autistic students in our program. So much so that we are approached by autistic parents just to, make sure that it's okay. We have over the years seen that for some reason they are included. What we plan to do though, because although they get the training, when they go out in the real world, they can't exist within that space because of the pace. So something that the hub will do is also address that inclusion thing. So we would create a safe space for autistic students to actually work at their own pace. But certainly it is a sector that allows those gender parity and inclusion and diversity to really, really flourish. We've seen that.
Wow, that's great news. And I look forward to continue to work with you on that, Camille, and to see where that takes us. I want to take some final questions, which are from our audience. And there are two that are really quite practical, and they both relate to technology. And I'll leave this to any of you to respond. For a startup that is starting an animation studio, which technologies would you recommend to adopt? For example, I heard Harmony Web CC, which allows off-site artists to tap directly into a studio's pipeline. Which other technologies would help to produce projects in large scale? And of course, I suppose this is an issue, right? Particularly if you're trying to capture those outsourcing streams, is to have the same or the required technology in order to do so. So what would you recommend, any of you, to speak to that if you're a small startup? You're on mute, Kaifas.
Sorry. Okay, I'll jump in and speak to the gaming aspect. I did it too. Okay, so I'm guilty. I started speaking before. I'm the mute man today. Well, I would say for the person asking the question that you're gonna definitely need something that's compatible with industry standards, and that buy-in sometimes is expensive. And I'm gonna speak more towards gaming, even though I know they ask for animation. And the only reason why I'm gonna put this in there because I've recently converted myself. There's programs out there that are actually free that can do things now that the industry standards, the industry themselves are starting to change their mind on. There's a lot of things that are happening in the industry when they're looking at software going, oh, the stuff is pretty good and it's free. Blender being an example of that. There's a lot of animated things that are being done in Blender. There's a Netflix film that was actually created entirely in Blender. The name escapes me right now, but I'm sure you can Google it and figure it out. But it was an entire film that's created 2D animation through Blender, which is a free software. And as far as video game goes is concerned, you can use that for gaming as well. There's Unreal Engine, which is free. There's the Unity Engine, which is free. And these things they're available to you and they're out there because, like I said earlier, there's not enough people to create the content that's needed. So people are starting to give away software. They're starting to give away programs. They're starting to give away content to see what creatives can generate because we need content in these industries.
Just to add to Kaifa's regarding animation itself, it is really, really critical that you have industry standard software if you're dealing with outsourcing. So for instance, outsourcing 2D animation, if you're not using Harmony, then I don't know, I don't know where you fit in. You know, Toon Boom Harmony is like everybody does it. So we do have to, in certain areas, stick to that sort of traditional software. So 2D animation for sure, Harmony, and of course 3D. We especially with the training that we do, we training Maya. And with Kaifa's ZBrush, those are the kind of technologies. And we also, with the hub and with our students, utilize VPN technology so that our students can work from home and utilize the software from the cloud. So that's also very important because like COVID now, people would have to work from home. So also invest in that kind of technology that allows people to work away from the traditional studio space.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of the session. We have about 3 minutes if anyone wants to say some final remarks, some quick final remarks. Kaifas, go ahead. I see you've got your hand up.
I just wanted to say, like, this industry is beautiful and it's amazing because if you think about it, we can create a product that could be global at the click of a button. That's all we have to do to make something go live around the world. One click and it's live. We don't have to worry about packaging it, distributing it, getting it from this place to that place, putting it on a boat, etc. One click and it goes global. And this is one of the things that makes it so exciting. And I think everybody should buy in and be excited about that part of technology.
Definitely agree. And I think what we need to do to see more of is more collaboration and much more interchange between us, not only the islands, but the whole larger, wider Caribbean, because, you know, animation it speaks to people without language. We don't have to have too much language involved. We can follow stories without a whole lot of words. So I think it's a universal language, and that's one of the things that makes it exciting.
Let me just add to that. I think that we have more similarities than differences in the Caribbean and Latin America as well. And so I think that if you were to just get a bunch of us in a room, creative people, you know, we won't leave out the persons who are setting policy and framework as well. You know, we won't leave out the educational person. But if we were to get us in a room, you know, have a drink online and just brainstorm ideas, you'd be very surprised what come out of a 30-minute session, and it could actually be something that creates something beautiful and also makes us money as well. So I think that there's definitely a way forward if we just decide to just do something together.
Yeah, and I know we're coming down to the end, but I just want to add to what everybody said. In my visit to LAC outsourcing in Argentina, I was there and I met with the animation network, the Latin American animation group. And I was sharing our challenges, which was to do with the fact that we were divided. Caribbean is divided by water. And something stuck with me when someone said, well, okay, you have that issue in the Caribbean. Our division is mountains, and we found ways to work with that. So what we want to share with the Latin American audience today is that, okay, let's make those mountains and water work for us, right? We are willing and we are open to work with you. We are literally your neighbors. The hub for the IDB hub at the university is going to be opening. We are going to have a virtual opening in October. So anyone who wants to actually participate in that, it would be great if you reach out to me because we are going to do a virtual tour also. So you will see the facilities and meet people virtually. We look forward, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone in the panel, but we look forward to sort of collaborating more with you all also. And thank you for the opportunity.
Much. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to our viewers who joined us here today. I hope that you enjoyed the session. I know certainly I learned a lot, and it's always a pleasure to see my friends and colleagues on this call. And so with that, I think we'll say goodbye from the animation game development design panel. Bye.
Thanks, Krista. It was great. Thanks all. Great talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.